I was reminiscing about Newark State College and Kane College, as it was called, when I was just leaving. And it brings back so many fond memories as I see professors in the room, like Professor Metzger and Professor Goodwin. But Alec did things that were truly amazing. When I was a brand new, newly minted out of high school college student, Alec had brought in performance artists who were doing things like assembling 100, 200, 300 students outside with chairs facing east or west. Alec also brought in an artist that rolled out felt on a floor, and we engaged in pulling that fine string back and forth slowly across that floor for hours. And then, to top it all off, he brought in people like Willoughby Sharp, who are in the conceptual art manuals today. I mean, most of those artists were in that conceptual art manual. And another performance artist who dug a pit and stood inside it and allowed people to water him as if he were to grow. So there was a spirit on this campus that was incredible. We didn't just drive in and drive back out, but we lived here, and we didn't just live here. We ate the soil. We tried to touch everything. And as we were driving around the campus, I remembered seeing a very old building that myself and Bill Happel, who's here today somewhere, and Bruce Bernheim, now called Bernard Bernard, and Paul Hebert, and a few other people, would track through vacant or unused buildings, and somehow we just felt like we wanted to discover the top of them or the very end of them. And that became part of our life on this campus. You're seeing work that is really of two phases. The spinners, the child's toy, the top, is a kind of work that I began developing slowly in the late 80s. And as a friend of mine who came to photograph me one day said, let's put these on the floor. And as he put them on the floor and I got down on the floor with them, I remembered being a child on the floor of my dad's toy store in Orange, New Jersey on Central Avenue. And that was really a cool moment because I was only 4 or 5 when that happened. And right after that, the store shut down and my dad went into a very different line of work. But for that moment in a child's memory, that reverie of a world of magic, I think left a big imprint on the work that I do today. I've never lost touch with the idea of the spinner and the feeling of creating a form that's in repose but has the feeling of spinning within its body. Then Ron and I launched the Pittsburgh Glass Center, and we spent a good 10 years fundraising for it, dreaming it, calling every manufacturer, purchasing every piece of equipment. As a matter of fact, a lot of the equipment was first bought on my credit card because the funding hadn't come in yet, promised from the funders, but we knew it was coming. And getting every room, we did the bubble drawings for the building, and visited every manufacturer. So what I'm saying is there was a labor of love, of building something for Pittsburgh that we thought was very important. But it goes back to my original thought of everyone can make a difference. Everyone makes a difference in their life, whether it's with their nieces and nephews, or in their house, or on their street, or in their neighborhood, or in their village, in their city, in their region, in the world. And I think you do that by doing it like Gandhi talked about it. It's just a stone that you launch, but you have to launch it. You have to launch it in order for that stone to create any ripple. And so by doing this glass center in Pittsburgh, we were launching a stone into the water. Coming back 10 years later, raising $3.5 million, getting the building done, I asked myself, what would my new work look like? Did I have new thoughts? Because I love the spinners, but I felt like there must be more. My life has changed in 10 years of building this thing in Pittsburgh. Something has happened. And one day, I woke up with the images of the drops and building bridges on a molecular level and trace. And I began to realize how it's magic that we built that center. It's a dream and it's fragile. It may not have ever happened, but it was building connections slowly and little by little that, however tenuous, they linked together just enough to make that happen. So I kind of launched up in the morning with that vision in my mind, and I drew those images down immediately because I was afraid I would lose them. And by drawing them down, I made a contract with myself to find out what they would be. So that's where the new work comes from. We talk about natural forces. That's where it's from.
How do you decide when to include words in your pieces?
The words are, they sort of traveled in on a piece that I was working on titled Passions. And it was a large form on the floor. It was about 18 inches high, 6 feet wide by 36 inches, and it looked like a fissure, like a rock fissure. And it happened while I was an artist in residence up in Corning, New York, where I had a chance to go to Tremaine State Park and see this wonderful WPA project where they were cutting into the rock and forming these fissures, and water was rolling over it. So I wanted to recreate that. So it was the first time I used a mirror and acid etching. On top of it, I wanted to put forms that had some connection to personal. So, and it was about folding and unfolding. I had read a poem by Rilke from the book of the Hours of Prayer. I want to unfold. I don't want to stay folded anywhere, because where I am folded, there I am a lie. And I thought, how interesting is that, the idea of folding and unfolding? So I began by making simple round forms that were just a sphere, almost like creating the history of blowing. The first one was a sphere. The second one was added a print onto it. The third one looked like a bell jar turned over on its side. The fourth one looked like a big lung form. And the fifth one started to again get very tiny. And I named them things like private, secrets, and of course the bell jar was secrets turned over. And the big lung form was laughter, because I love that idea of such a big, strong laugh that your lungs exhaust. And so they were all about naming. And then as Ron and I started a conversation, I came back and I said, I don't know why, but I feel like I have to name every one of those things. I have to put a name on it. And he said, well, that makes sense. You know, that's a Genesis notion, that man has control over his creatures by, remember when you said that? By naming them. And I thought, oh, that's beautiful. And it's also by naming your passions, you know, your privacy, your laughter, your secrets. Then I let that piece go, and I began to think about giant perfume bottles and how the world of advertising and commodity takes the most wonderful words and turns them into paper, money. And I wanted to take those words back and etch them onto the side of a form and make them really express my notion of a woman, or the thought or the sense of a woman inside that bottle. So in this case, this is called conjuring. And sometimes I pick words that I feel have double meanings to them. They're both nice, and they could be sort of wicked on the other side. But I'm really looking at them as being very powerful, very strong images, but in such an unobtrusive form as a perfume bottle. So that's where the word comes from.
Could you talk a little bit about working the larger pieces on a personal level?
Yeah.
A lot of glass.
It's a lot of glass, and it's hard. And I like a challenge. I like fire. I love fire. But I don't make these alone. Again, my husband works with me, Ron, who's also an artist and partner. He has glass work too. I work with him on his work. He works with me on my work. These are blown partly into sand. I think I showed in my slides today a sand bed that Paul Marioni was casting into. Well, after Paul left, the sand bed was still there. And I thought that would be wonderful to figure out what other things we could do with this sand. And we'd just come back from the West where I'd walked a crater rim. And I think I just started by wanting to make a crater in the sand, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. The only way to make that spinner and to make it so it has that kind of almost bursting quality is to blow it in that sand mold. And it took me so many generations of working on that form to get it to that point. That form did start a little bit just in clear, because I was thinking only in clear at the time. And I wanted to make kind of a plumb bob shape, something like that. And I remember starting with that form almost just as an example to show students a what if. Like, hey, you don't have to just hot pour into this. We can blow into this, and look what will happen. And this form came out, and I sat it down on the table, and it was clear. And again, I left it for a couple of months because it was new. I didn't know what I was doing with it. And I woke up again out of a dream seeing color all over it. And then I had to figure out how I was going to put the color in and what the color was going to mean. To me, it has to be a whirling form. It has to talk about movement, and then I go from there. You can see the final gather always has a sort of a ridge on it. And I like that ridge. I like that being the end and showing that last gather rather than hiding it. And this upper form is very dense.